I'm alcoholic. Thanks, guys. For those of you who don't know, I am moving down to Raleigh, North Carolina at the end of the month, so this is my swan song. I've gone to a bunch of meetings I haven't been to in a while, and to say goodbye to some people I don't see often and whatnot. And by definition, what that means is you get sandbagged because sometimes speakers don't show up or whatever. So I've spoken like 8 times in the last 3 weeks, So I was going to change my story a little bit just to make it interesting, but maybe I'll just stick with the facts. So I grew up in an AA household. AA was a very positive thing when I grew up. My father got into the program when I was about 1 year old. The family had broken up because of alcoholism, and I ended up living with a grandmother and an aunt in Jackson Heights. But any interaction I had with my father and other people related to the family in any way, shape, or form, AA was always a great thing because you were either in AA or you were a drunk, an active alcoholic. There's no middle ground. And so any exposure I had to my dad's friends and whatnot, they were all in AA. And I remember my first visit to an AA meeting. I was age 5. I was born in Lenox Hill Hospital. And I remember when I was 5, my father holding my hand and bringing me into the hospital, and I swore, I was already a problem child, I swore he was bringing me back. Could I get a refund on this kid? And in actuality, what it was, there was some sort of celebration down in the auditorium of the hospital, an AA celebration. And a guy walks up to my father and says, "Oh, Joe just got brought in. He looks really bad." And, even at this young age, I'm a New Yorker, so I automatically assumed he was mugged. And what it turned out, he was a chronic slipper, and they all knew him. And he was brought in yet again for the detox. And one of the things that resonated from that experience with, being in an AA meeting was how everybody seemed like they were very close. Which, by the way, get a little emotional here, this is exactly the way I feel about AA. I don't think the ability to develop relationships out on the streets is as easy as it is here in the rooms. If you're really wrapped up in the program, as I feel as though I am, I think it's much easier to develop intimacy in relationships. And I heard recently in a meeting, intimacy is into me see. So fast forward real quick, I start my own drinking career, and by the time I'm 16, I'm already in trouble. And I've decided that I should join the service and get out of Jackson Heights because Jackson Heights is the problem. And the unfortunate thing about that is I brought myself with me. And I was the problem. I was on a nuke sub up in New London, Connecticut. I was the problem sailor, I was the worst guy. And a bunch of shenanigans went on there. And ultimately, I got out of the service. I was up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And DWI number 1, DWI number 2, driving after revocation, writing bad checks, shoplifting, going downhill by the moment. Someplace in there, I decided that maybe I should see a psychologist because there's probably a mental issue here. Some sort of little tweak that we could do that I could still do the drinking part but not get in trouble for it. And 15 minutes into my first session with this therapist, he wanted me to do some weird crap, and he wanted me to stand up on a chair. And as I'm telling my story, he's shaking the chair, and I'm like, this guy's strange. But he did give me what I needed, and that was he directly called me an alcoholic. And that at least started the process of me wrapping my head around that. And it didn't seem too much of a shock to me, and it didn't even seem like something like, oh, that's terrible. It was like, oh, okay, we got a word for this thing. And maybe there was a little connection to my dad at that point then, and, so I wasn't resistant to it. And he said, go to a meeting tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, there's a school next door. I want you to go down. So I said, fine, no problem. Went in, same sort of table set up as this. Felt very comfortable in the meeting. And, I went back the following week and reported to the guy that I thought that was a genius idea, and I felt really good. And that was a great meeting. And he said, well, where'd you go the next night? I said, I didn't. You told me to go to that meeting. So I didn't understand immediately. I didn't understand that it was one of these things that you do repetitively. And so at some point he kind of talked me through that, and he says you should probably, give out your number and take other people's numbers and, go for coffee and, all these other things. And I don't know, I'm sort of a sociable guy, right? But I think I'm shy. And I didn't reach out to anybody, and no one reached out to me in that same sort of way. I mean, aside from saying hello, people did do that, but nobody grabbed me and said, listen, hang out with me. And then on me, I didn't grab somebody and say, can I hang out with you? So I attended meetings, and I felt like I was pretty young. I don't know what I was at that time, let's say 24, 23. And there was a lot of older people around. So I don't know if I felt like I fit in. But at some point I did, with a lot of fits and starts, I did hook up with this older guy, not into the big book, not into steps. Probably had 20 years at the time. Did a lot of meetings. Went to a meeting every night. And we'd say we're going to meet someplace, or we'd drive together or whatever. And again, this is up in New Hampshire. And we had ourselves a hell of a schedule. But I had no sponsor. I hung out with this guy, but I had no sponsor. Didn't do the steps. No home group. No commitment. All of the meat and potatoes was missing. The coffee was good. Cookies were good. Fellowship was good. People started to recognize my name a little bit here and there, and I'd recognize other people and hello. But, the binding element, the water in the cement wasn't there. And, so a couple of other little factors happened in there, and ultimately, I gave up. And had to leave that state. I gave up enough that state was off limits now. X that one off. There's only now 49 states in the U.S. So I came back here where I'm from, and I was a little nervous about it because, all of my, half of my friends have passed now because, everybody was in some sort of jackpot, and, these were serious partiers. And so long story short, for a gift from God was I did meet a girl. And I started to pretend to this girl that I'm a gentleman, and we would go out, and I'd do very sophisticated things like order champagne, and I'd have, cocktails at the bar while we waited for the table, and, when we sat down, I'd switch to wine, and it was very, very, very sophisticated. And as soon as I drop her off at midnight, I'd go out. Now I'd really hang out, and I like to say that the places that I hung out in those days, so this would have been, late 80s, you wiped your feet on the way out. It was ugly. You know what I mean? Like if I showed you some of these places, I'd be embarrassed even to show you guys, right? So I'm with, that girl's name's Martha. I'm with her for about 2 years, and I've moved in. I've taken her hostage. And she has an apartment. I've moved in. And I get the sense that this is going to blow up. This is going to go bad. So I say to her, I'm going to go back to AA. Now, I was never really in AA. I went to a bunch of meetings, but I was never in AA. But she was very excited. She thought I was a real spiritual dude and, improving my life and whatnot. And I show up at a meeting, and I do the exact same thing. Now, by then, I'm working in the city, so all my meetings are lunchtime meetings, and with the occasional evening meeting here and there, but I am just visiting. And so I had no defense against the first drink because I hadn't done the steps yet, don't have the sponsor. I'm not giving back yet. What is the psychic change we learn about? It's the shift from taking from life to giving to life, right? The idea that I come to a meeting because I need a meeting is, 3% of what I do here. I go to a meeting because somebody said, hey, I want to meet you at the meeting, or I need a ride to the meeting, or I'm supposed to make the coffee, or that shift isn't possible without doing this. So I go from 1990, God's great to me again. God gives me the elimination of mental obsession over booze immediately. I go to my first meeting, 1990, and I don't want to drink anymore. Don't even know how it happened. Friggin' miracle. But all I do is attend meetings. And so I start out pretty good, 4 or 5 meetings a week. A year or two goes by, it's 3 meetings a week. Year or two goes by, it's 2 meetings a week. Because I don't feel like drinking, so why would you go to meetings? Don't get it. It doesn't make sense. So I collect a coin for the first 6 years, and then for the second 6 years, I don't even get a coin. But I would tell you I'm in AA because I got sober in AA. Still hadn't done the steps, still don't have a home group, still don't have a sponsor. So again, no defense against the first drink. I'm down in Philadelphia, and I'm on a business trip, and I'm at a long dais, and it's a Cuban restaurant. The guy across from me says, Cuban food, gotta have rum. And for me, 12 years of no drinking from age 27 to age 40, it's too big of a leap. So I ordered a beer. And it made perfect sense. I did not think I was BSing myself. I said to myself, listen, try it out. You're 40 now. It was probably the drugs anyway. It wasn't the booze. You're an adult now. You can handle this. And you know what? If you're wrong in this experiment, just go back to AA. Sit in the meeting, raise your hand every once in a while, drink some more coffee, and you can just get right back where you were. No possibility of a loss. So I get back so I drink that night, no jackpot, come back into the city on Monday, and all of a sudden, overnight, there's a blackboard outside of every Irish pub. I don't know how it happened. And they all say, burger and a beer, $10. And this makes complete financial sense to me.
If you think it's all right, it's all right.
So I start on my experiment, and about 6 months into the experiment, I'm hiding it from my wife. I'm only drinking it at lunchtime.
I hope there are some new people.
I'm starting to get a beer gut. But fortunately, I did find out that on the Atkins diet, that if you switch over to vodka, it has no carbs. So I could actually have financial benefits from this experiment, and I could lose weight. So I switched over to
all my old ideas.
And,
I realize now that all of my old ideas, my whole game plan for living, my whole plan, everything, every conviction, every attitude, every prejudice, everything that I had about the world are my ideas, and it was like carrying around a 150-pound rock.
Raise my hand,
but it was my rock.
I'm struggling. I need help.
It was mine.
I think through osmosis,
I put this thing together.
I'll be okay.
This was the real me.
And
it was
I'm
this
not.
rock.
And I do that again.
And I came in here, and it was like I was in the ocean of alcoholism.
I
and
just
AA
give
gave
up.
me a life
I say,
preserver.
screw it. I'm going to have to take this train right to the last stop.
This is my rock.
Don't even try and
they're
fight
yelling
it.
out there,
just hide it the best you can and just let the thing blow up. You can't stop. You're powerless over stopping it. Screw it. Let it happen. So God is good to me again. I'm entertaining some clients at Smith & Wollensky.
I got the thing. And they're going, hey, drop the rock out there.
I'm in a fight. Well, I should say he's in a fight. I'm on the floor.
I said, how do I get up there?
And I'm ejected, as is he. But a lot of my colleagues in the business are very loyal. And they left with me. We go to another bar. I think it's over on the west side. I remember taking my last drink.
Finally one day, I don't know, something terrible happened. It took my attention away and I dropped it.
I wanted to see where the screws were.
And I was terrified.
Nothing like that.
My
I
rock.
Stoli rocks because it seemed like
I was looking down there, I was like a water skier. I came up on the top of the water.
Knowing I was way beyond where I could handle it. Put it down, fake like I'm going to the bathroom, and I leave. Next thing I remember, I'm on the back on the east side, mid-50s, and I'm passed out on some of these brownstone steps. And I'm awoken by a police officer about 11:30, and he's pushing me with his foot, saying, "Get up." And apparently somebody's called from upstairs.
Whenever it takes place,
I don't know what's the matter with
because
them, but
this
they
is
don't
how
like
I'll
people
know
sleeping
about
on their
God
chair
even
on their
more.
stairs.
I want to be out
Not sleeping, I
there
was actually
with
passed
you,
out.
some new person out there.
So he wakes me up and
you got that sparkle in
says
your
to
eye,
me,
and you got that whole
"Let me see
vitality
your
going
ID."
about Alcoholics
And
Anonymous,
panic comes
and you're
to me
looking at some new guy and
because
you're
I have
saying,
just spent an
"Drop the
awful
rock.
lot of
It's the
energy
greatest. Thank you."
hiding my drinking, and I am now afraid that I am going to be found out by my wife. So that the panic was that, not from the police. I've had lots of experience with police. The panic was that I was now going to be a liar. And I didn't want that. And that the gig was going to be up, because now it's going to be known stuff. And so as I'm standing there, I'm thinking about, how I can talk my way out of it. It's not going to happen. He says, I have to take you to the precinct. So he's putting me in the back of the car, and he has his hand on the top of my head, and he's helping me bend my knee to get in the back seat. And as he's doing it, somebody rides by on a 10-speed bike, and it immediately registers to me bike messenger. He's got that look, kind of an East Village look. And he swoops around and he says to the cop, I'm in AA, I'll take care of him. Now, I don't know about you, but cops don't typically turn over drunks to strangers on the street, right? Now, granted, I had vomit over here and on my briefcase, and but I'm in a suit, it's 12 midnight, this guy's on a 10-speed bike that looks like he just got it from the junk shop, right? Dressed short, it's the end of September, everything doesn't match up. And he turns me over to this guy, and this guy stands with me until my transportation comes. And it's a long time, it's at least a half hour. And doesn't hit me with a big book, doesn't tell me all the stuff I did wrong, was merely there for me. And I am sure he was the most sober person at that moment. He was doing the psychic change. He was performing 12-step work right there. And so I get home, look my wife directly in the eye, and I say, I wasn't drinking. And the following morning, I wake up, and it comes to me that if I am not absolutely honest with my wife, this process will never start. So I had intuitive knowledge. I had something that went into my gut that said, you're going to have to come up with the courage to tell your wife you've been lying now. And I don't know how it happened. If you would have told me, you got to go to Afghanistan tomorrow, far easier than telling my wife I've been lying for 3 years. Far easier. And so I do. Very supportive. She says, terrific. So again, I'm going back to AA, and this is 2005. So my experiment lasted for 3 years. I'm now 43 years old, and it's 2005. And I go to Citigroup in Manhattan, and by the grace of God, I'm going to wrap this up real fast. By the grace of God, I sit next to a guy, Marshall, who is the sponsorship coordinator. And I raise my hand, so now I'm honest with my wife. Now I walk into the meeting, I'm honest at the meeting, Tim, 2 days, whatever the hell I said. The guy next to me says he's the sponsorship coordinator. At the end of the meeting, I say, I need a sponsor. He says, I got the sponsor for you. And I'm glad that service is sometimes provided at a lot of groups, because I don't think I would have had the courage to have waited, and particularly if I would have waited a period of time where I felt better, would I have had the courage to go up to somebody and say, I need help. So the fact that he just gave me somebody, a guy that I would have never picked in the whole world, he gave me the perfect guy for me. I would have thought it was a little bit like dating, you know what I mean? Too old, too young, I got to check him out more, But he gives me my current sponsor, John C., who was at that time 16 years sober, was so wrapped up in AA, it's mind-boggling. I think he's more wrapped up now at 27 years than he was back then, between group commitments and senior commitments and intergroup, and oh my God, he was going on retreats, and you got to sell literature, and then he introduced me to my grand sponsor, Nestor. So this blanket came over me, engulfed me. And I basically just had to mimic what these guys did. That's all I had to do. And I think within my first 90 days, we were on a retreat. Did my fifth step at Graymore. And that was a spiritual experience. I felt 20 pounds lighter. I felt all in. I felt like I earned my uniform. That was my seat. Like, I belong here now. So that happened with 5, continued on with the steps, started making some amends, started living in 10, 11, and 12, additional commitments in the group, additional responsibilities within AA. So I'm going to close with this. Everything that I did in the first 90 days, 6 months is exactly what I do today. In fact, I probably hustle a little bit more. It's more important to me now. I didn't know what I was getting into back then. I was just doing it through mimicking. Now I'm doing it because I see around me that the potential of heading away from the program is probably the greatest danger for me. I feel rock solid when I'm all in. And I don't want to test the water. I don't want another experiment. I don't want to test the waters with what it will seem like with 3 meetings a week. I don't want to see that, right? I don't want to feel that. I don't want to risk that. I want to get more and more and more of what we feel right now. Thanks so much.